Frieza deceived everyone and became a god of destruction. And with that came his new power, Black Frieza, reworked using Hakai. What will become of all our Z warriors now? Stay tuned to the video because it's absolutely insane. First of all, in narrative, conceptual, and impact terms within the logic of the Dragon Ball Super Universe, Frieza with Hakai would be more badass than Vegeta with Hakai. Not because Vegeta is inferior, but because the meaning and consequences of this power in Frieza are far deeper and more dangerous. Vegeta learning Hakai is a coherent evolution of his arc. He seeks to break with the past, accepts the philosophy of destruction as discipline, and learns that erasing something requires detachment and emotional control. Hakai in him is an instrument of personal growth. It is strong, impressive, but limited by Vegeta himself. He does not fully surrender to the concept of destruction. He uses the power, but does not become the power. This creates a clear narrative ceiling. Vegeta would never become a hostage to Hakai, nor would he allow it to define his identity. Frieza is the complete opposite. Hakai would not conflict with his essence. It would amplify it. Frieza already thinks like a god of destruction even before holding the title. He does not destroy on impulse, but by calculation, convenience, and message. Giving Hakai to Frieza is not teaching him something new. It is removing the last barrier between intention and consequence. Unlike Vegeta, Frieza would have no moral conflict whatsoever in erasing entire existences if it reinforced his position. He would not need to learn detachment, because he was never attached. Moreover, Hakai in Vegeta is technical. He needs to concentrate energy, control emotion, align mind and body. In Frieza, Hakai would be conceptual. He would quickly understand that the technique is not merely destructive energy, but existential authority. Hakai does not erase only bodies. It erases histories, legacies, future possibilities. Frieza is a strategist who thinks long-term. He would use Hakai not to win battles, but to rewrite the board before the battle even exists. There is also the symbolic factor. Vegeta, using Hakai, is confirmation that he has approached the gods. Frieza, using Hakai, would be confirmation that the gods were wrong to allow his ascension. This changes the tone of the narrative. With Vegeta, Hakai elevates a hero. With Frieza, Hakai creates a systemic problem. A villain who no longer needs armies, economic domination, or psychological terror, because he now possesses the cosmic right to decide what deserves to continue existing. In terms of threat, Frieza, with Hakai, surpasses Vegeta not only in brutality, but in institutional unpredictability. Vegeta would never use Hakai against allies, never distort the concept for personal benefit. Frieza would do exactly that, always within a plausible justification. He would not be a chaotic destroyer, but a biased judge. This is far more dangerous than raw strength. Finally, there is the impact on Goku. Vegeta, with Hakai, pushes Goku to evolve technically. Frieza, with Hakai, forces Goku to question the very system of the gods, something he rarely does. This elevates the conflict from physical to philosophical. And in Dragon Ball Super, when the conflict stops being only about who hits harder and becomes about who decides the fate of the universe, the most badass character is not the most powerful, but the one who changes the rules of the game. For all these reasons, Frieza with Hakai would not only be more impactful than Vegeta, but would redefine the concept of antagonist in Dragon Ball Super. He would not be just another strong villain. He would be a divine mistake in motion. So, based on this, Goku already frightened by the black form. Now imagine a Frieza with Hakai power. What would truly transform Frieza into a god of destruction? For Frieza to become a god in a way coherent with the internal logic of Dragon Ball Super, this would not happen through direct conquest, nor through victory in combat, much less through acclaim. Frieza's transformation into a divinity would require a structural alignment with the cosmic system, something far more political, philosophical, and functional than physical. The Dragon Ball universe leaves clear clues as to how this process would work, and Frieza is, paradoxically, one of the few mortals who would truly fit this path. The first step would not be to assume power, but to assume function. Gods of destruction do not exist because they are the strongest, but because they occupy a specific role within universal balance. Beerus does not destroy out of personal desire, but because the system demands that something be eliminated so that something else may flourish. For Frieza, this transition is logically possible because he already operates under a mentality of hierarchy and necessity. Unlike Goku, who fights for challenge, or Vegeta, who fights for pride and identity, Frieza has always understood power as administration. He governs, controls, decides. This profile is far closer to that of a god of destruction than it seems at first glance. The second essential element would be divine legitimization. In Dragon Ball Super, no god of destruction arises by inheritance or direct conquest. They are chosen and recognized by the Hakaishins and the angels. This point is crucial. Even if Frieza fully mastered Hakai, that alone would not automatically make him a god. He would need to be considered necessary. This could happen in a scenario where Beerus becomes unstable, negligent, or simply incompatible with a new phase of the universe. If balance begins to fail, not due to excess destruction, but due to a lack of it, the system will seek a functional replacement, not a hero. This is where Frieza becomes a logical and terrifying option. He would not destroy on impulse. He would destroy with calculation. For the cosmic system, this is an advantage. A god of destruction must not be emotionally unstable, nor excessively compassionate. He must be efficient. Frieza, unlike many candidates, would have no moral crisis in accepting this role. This reduces systemic risks. The universe does not need a god to be good. It needs him to be consistent. The third step involves the separation between mortal identity and divine function. Frieza could not continue to be emperor of the universe, while also being an active god of destruction. This would create a conflict of interest. To become a god, he would have to give up the empire, direct control over planets and armies. This sacrifice is not small, but for Frieza it could be strategic. Trading limited territorial dominance for absolute cosmic authority is not a loss, it is ascension. This decision would mark the definitive transition from villain to systemic entity. The fourth element is the bond with an angel. Every god of destruction requires an angel not only as a mentor, but as a regulator. The angel does not serve the god, it serves the system. Frieza would have to accept supervision, something that seems contradictory to his personality, but which, from another perspective, he would understand perfectly. A system functions better with layers of control. Frieza has always trusted hierarchical structures. Accepting an angel would not be submission, but formalization of power. The greatest consequence of this process is the psychological and philosophical impact on Frieza himself. By becoming a god of destruction, he would cease to be an agent of personal chaos and would become a cog in the universe. He could no longer act out of revenge, rivalry, or pleasure. Every act of destruction would carry cosmic weight. This is the true test, not of strength, but of restraint. And, ironically, Frieza might be one of the few capable of enduring this without collapsing, precisely because he never sought moral approval. For Goku and Vegeta, this ascension would be more disturbing than any new transformation. Goku would lose an enemy in the traditional sense, because one cannot fight against a function of the universe. Vegeta would see his own path as a divine candidate being eclipsed by someone who did not seek redemption, but efficiency. The conflict would cease to be physical and would become existential. Therefore, Frieza would become a god not because he defeated someone, but because the universe needed him, not as a reward, but as a solution. And that is exactly what would make this possibility as dangerous as it is coherent within the logic of Dragon Ball Super. Another possibility is Frieza pretending that he has changed, just as he deceived Frost in the Tournament of Power, and just as Frost always did in his own universe before being exposed. Yes, not only could he pretend, but this would in fact be the most dangerous and most coherent path for Frieza rather than any transparent ascension. If with Frost the lie was small, opportunistic, and limited to a tournament, with Frieza it would be structural, long-term, and designed to deceive not only mortals, but the divine system itself. Frieza would never seek the position of God of Destruction by exposing himself as he truly is. He would understand from the beginning that the Hakaishins and, above all, the angels do not choose based on brute strength, but on stability, predictability, and functional alignment. Therefore, the first layer of the farce would not be kindness, but controlled efficiency. Frieza would begin to act like someone who destroys only when necessary, eliminating real threats to universal balance, sparing irrelevant worlds, and occasionally saving entire systems not out of compassion, but calculation. To divine eyes, this would not look like falseness, but maturity. Just as Frost sold himself as a hero while profiting in the shadows, Frieza would sell himself as an agent of cosmic order, while silently repositioning the universe in his favor. The difference is that Frost lied to naive mortals. Frieza would lie to entities that observe entire eras. Because of that, the farce could not be emotional. It would have to be logical. He would not display pleasure in destruction. He would not provoke. He would not seek to humiliate. He would become almost boring, predictable, bureaucratic. Exactly the type of profile the divine system prefers. The critical point would lie in Hakai. Frieza would not display absolute mastery of the technique immediately. He would commit mistakes, calculated hesitations, as if he were still learning to separate personal judgment from universal necessity. This would create technical empathy in the angels, who would see in him a mortal trying to adapt to a greater function, and not a tyrant seeking power. The lie here is not what he does, but the reason why he does it. The farce would also require Frieza to publicly accept limits. Just as Frost pretended to play fair in public, Frieza would accept being contradicted by Hakaishins, would accept warnings from an angel, and would retreat on minor decisions. Each retreat would strengthen his image of balance. Each concession would, in truth, be an investment, because while everyone would believe that Frieza is learning to respect the system, he would be learning how the system reacts, where it fails, and, most importantly, who truly holds power. The mistake that almost no one would notice is that the divine system was not built to deal with someone who understands hierarchy better than the system itself. Frieza would not try to break rules. He would exploit them. If a god of destruction can only act when authorized, Frieza would ensure that requests for authorization always reach him shaped in a convenient way. If destruction requires justification, he would create scenarios where destruction appears inevitable. It would not be a direct lie. It would be context engineering. Goku would fall easily for this farce, because for him intention matters more than structure. Vegeta would be suspicious, but would have no proof, exactly as happened with Frost, only on a divine scale. The real risk would lie with the angels. If an angel began to perceive patterns, not of malice, but of constant indirect benefit for Frieza, then the farce would enter its final phase. At that point, Frieza would no longer need to pretend, because once recognized as a god, the line between intention and function ceases to matter. A god is not judged by what he feels, but by what he maintains. Thus, unlike Frost, Frieza's lie would not be exposed in a tournament or in a moment of tension. It would only be perceived too late, when everyone understands that they were not deceived by a villain pretending to be a hero, but by a ruler pretending to be a piece of the system, when in reality, he became the system itself operating according to his logic.